Today we will be exploring neuter nouns. Neuter nouns only appear in the second, third, and fourth declensions. However, before we meet the fourth declension neuter nouns for the first time, let's review the neuter nouns of the second and third declensions. Remember that a declension is like a family, and you can easily identify which declension a noun belongs to by looking at the genitive singular. All nouns, regardless of gender, which end in E, that is a long I in the genitive singular, belong to the second declension. So proilium, proilii, is a second declension noun. We can immediately identify proilium as a neuter noun because it ends in um in the nominative singular. And all nouns which end in um in the nominative singular are second declension neuters. Okay, let's take a look at the endings. I'm first going to write down the endings with which you are already familiar because they are shared with the second declension masculine endings. For the singular, we have e, o, and o. For the plural, we have orum, and then is for the dative and ablative plural. Okay, now let's look at the endings which are unique to the neuters of the second declension. We have in the nominative singular, and then a for the nominative and accusative plural. Go ahead and pause the video and see if you can find any patterns. Okay, you may have noticed some patterns with which you're already familiar. The dative and ablative singular both have o, and the dative and ablative plural both have is. In addition, you may have noticed that the nominative and accusative singular are both and the nominative and accusative plural are both a. The fact that the nominative and accusative is the same for both the singular and the plural is a unique feature of neuter nouns, and this will reoccur in the third and fourth declensions. Okay, now I want you to pause the video and decline proilium, proilii, in both the singular and the plural. In just a few seconds, I'll write up the answers. Okay, here's proilium declined in the singular and the plural. Don't forget to put two i's where it's applicable, such as in the genitive singular and the dative and ablative plural. The first I is part of the stem. Okay, now let's look at our word corpus corporis. As you may remember, we can identify the declension of the noun based on the genitive singular. All nouns which end in is, that is a short is, in the genitive singular belong to the third declension. We can immediately identify corpus as a third declension neuter noun because all nouns which are third declension and end in us are neuter. Corpus is also a fun word because it's got lots of great derivatives, some of which are kind of morbid, like corpse. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at the endings. Once again, I'm going to write down the endings which are familiar to you first, because they are shared with the endings of the masculine and feminine. We have is in the genitive, then e in the dative, and in the ablative singular. For the plural, we have for the genitive plural, and then ibis for the dative and ablative plural. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at the endings which are unique to third declension neuters. If you may recall, the nominative singular does not have a standard ending for the third declension, and so I typically write a blank. The same applies here for neuter nouns. Because the nominative and the accusative always share the same endings, regardless of the declension for neuter nouns, I'm also going to write a blank here for the accusative. These two forms will be identical. For the plural, I have an a, and then an a again for the accusative. Once again, these two forms will be identical. Alright, now I want you to decline corpus corporis in the singular and plural. Keep in mind that this noun, like many third declension nouns, has a stem change, and you use the stem corpor for all of the forms aside from the nominative and the accusative singular. So for example, for the genitive, you would write corporis. Go ahead and give it a shot. In just a few seconds, I'll put up the answers. Okay, here's corpus declined in the singular and the plural. Like I said before, we're using the stem corpor for every single form except for the nominative and the accusative. Once again, these two forms should be identical. Okay, I think we're ready to look at the fourth declension. Here are some example fourth declension sentences which use fourth declension neuter nouns. Our first sentence, cornu dexter forte erat. I translate this as the right wing was strong. Our fourth declension neuter noun is cornu, which means the wing of the army. As you can tell from this sentence, the right wing is your nominative for the sentence. Specifically, our noun wing is the nominative. Okay, that means that this form, cornu, must be the nominative ending. And the word wing here is singular, so cornu must be a nominative singular ending. I'll go ahead and write u is nominative singular. Let's take a look at our next sentence. Manum ingenu posuit. I translate this as he placed his hand on his knee. We have genu, our neuter noun, following the preposition in. It's a place where, so this should be an ablative. And we only have one knee that we're talking about, so this is singular. Interesting. The u ending is also an ablative singular ending. Okay, let's check out the next sentence. Videmus magnum pecu. We saw a large flock. Our fourth declension neuter noun here is pecu, which means flock. As we can see from the English sentence, we saw a large flock. The noun flock is being used as the direct object. It is what is being seen. So this pecu ending must be an accusative ending. And we're only talking about one flock, so once again, this must be singular. Well, that's really weird. U is also an accusative singular ending. Interesting. Let's go ahead and look at our chart. Here we have the noun knee, which we just saw on the previous sentence. We have genu, genus. That should have a make run over it. Okay. So as we saw in the previous slide, we had an u ending for the nominative. We also had an u ending for the accusative singular and for the ablative singular. This is all correct. In fact, this is what makes the fourth declension neuter both really easy to memorize and sometimes a bit confusing while translating. For the genitive, we maintain the us ending, which is the signal of the fourth declension. That is, all fourth declension words have us as their genitive singular. And for the dative, we have, that's right, you guessed it, just u. That means that 4 out of the 5 endings in the singular are u. In the plural, it looks a little more normal. We have ua, then we have which is familiar to you from the masculine and feminine. Then we have ibis, that's also familiar. We have ua, because these two forms, the nominative and accusative, need to be identical. And then we have ibis. Okay. I'm sure you're all wondering, how do I translate when I have 4 of the forms that look the same? Plus, uwa is the same for the nominative and accusative, and then ibis is the same for the dative and ablative. Well, it's all based on context. And keep in mind, the Romans never made sentences that they couldn't make sense of themselves. It's always possible to determine the case. A lot of times you can rely on the help of an adjective, which might help you out and show you what the case should be. Okay, now I want you to decline genu, genus by yourself. In just a few seconds, I'll put up the answers. Okay, here is ganu ganus, declined in the singular and the plural. Now let's take a look at some of the patterns for the second, third, and fourth declension neuter nouns. What I have up here are all the neuter singular endings for those three declensions. See if you can take just a second and find some patterns. Okay, hopefully it should have jumped out at you that the nominative and accusatives are identical for each declension. For example, for the second declension, they both have an ending. For the third declension, whatever happens on the blank is repeated again down for the accusative singular. And for the fourth declension, the "u" is repeated from the nominative and the accusative. Once again, the nominative and accusative singulars should be identical for the neuters. Now let's look at the neuter plural endings. Once again, just take a second and see if you can find some patterns. Okay, you should see some patterns which are already familiar to you, such as the ending in the genitive plural, or the ibus, which is found in the third and fourth declension, dative and ablative plural. In addition, hopefully you should have seen that the nominative and accusative ending of "a" is repeated regardless of the declension for all neuters. We have "a" for the second declension, nominative and accusative plural, again for the third declension, nominative and accusative plural, and "uwa" for the fourth declension, nominative and accusative, which essentially has that same "a" ending. Okay, those are the patterns for neuter nouns.